Right, guys. So we have entered a long position here. We have stops below this recent structure down here. Could always extend them a bit because we're looking at this more of a long-term position, which is why targets are all-time highs. And depending on obviously how this breaks out, we can not necessarily have a target and just either extend this or keep moving our stop loss up as we trend to the upside. But I want to look here at the 5 minute chart. Um, we broke down below this level and we finally pushed back above. And I was eyeing this a bit because um, this is obviously a very important level relative to where we are now. And so the fact that we sort of didn't really care about this level, we just wasn't we didn't make a definitive break to the downside and then come up and retest. It was sort of just consolidation at the level. So once we began to move to the upside, we get into a position, right? And so that's what we're looking at now. And I think obviously at some point we can come down back into this level and retest for another entry, which would be awesome. But yeah, just pretty simple. Um, yeah, pretty simple stuff. We have our stop under here, and yeah, I think what we'll probably see is something like this, right? Something like that. And so, we don't want to get too ahead of ourselves. We can get potentially another entry here, so we don't want to, try to push things too much at the beginning here. But overall, I am beginning to become very bullish on gold. On gold because um, the with all of what I talked about earlier, with all of the rate news and just the way that the economy is going right now, I think gold is going to have some pretty, in my opinion, pretty historic moves over the next couple months until the end of the year and probably into the new year too. Um, I do understand usually when we have a 50 basis point cut, uh, we will have a large correction at some point in the overall market. But I think overall gold with inflation likely to increase again, I think gold is going to be a really safe bet for lots of long swing positions. And so that's what I'm looking at now. Really, it's like, we came down to test this level. And yeah, we went down a little bit, but like I said, like I always say, nothing will be perfect, right? And we didn't really take this level into account that much. We sort of just broke above, like I showed on the 5 minute chart. And so, yeah, I mean, this would maybe be a little bit too early for some people. And that's, like I said, we could always get another entry here on a pullback into this support to then move higher. But overall, stops under here I think are great. And, you could want to have them like under here. But again, we're looking at more of swing positions now, longer positions. And so I don't want to get caught in a nasty wick down here. And yeah, and then we'll just go from there and we'll see how long it takes to break this high. I don't want us to get stuck in consolidation like this. And if we do, and we can clearly tell that that's what's going on, then I'm just going to look for lows, things like this down at a key level, wherever the key support would be down here. And then just look for a handful of smaller long positions to build a larger position. That makes sense. So, yeah, anyway. All right, guys, I wanted to give a little update here on gold. Gold has moved pretty nicely. We came up from where we had entered and little retracement and are now working our way back up. I really like this formation here because we did not come straight down back into this zone. We made another higher low. So a handful of higher lows here. So really good, just simple bullish price action. We're at a little minor resistance here. This is obviously, all-time highs we're pushing here on gold. But overall, obviously because of the rate announcement, no reason to be bearish right now. We're really just going with what's simple and what makes sense. And I think stops are fine where they are. Maybe we'll have some drawdown. I'm fine keeping them here. But I also entered a position on silver. Now I had this here as a limit. So we got in as soon as we touched into this zone here. Now this is a zone that I've had marked here for a little bit. If we go up to an hour, we can kind of see it's sort of just a minor support level, but within this is pretty interesting price action when this occurs. But yeah, really just a area of traffic is what we were looking for, and then obviously we came down to this level and respected it as support previously here. and a fairly big stop loss, I will admit, fairly big, but this is something that we can adjust obviously as we go on. I'm very confident in the position, and so I'm fine having the stop loss. Obviously, if you wanted to, you could move it a little bit, or even there if you wanted to. But I would just rather, I'm expecting gold and silver to be bullish here for the foreseeable future. So I do not want to be stopped out in a stupid, stupid way where it was just unavoidable and would have just been a simple drawdown. But ultimately, all we're looking for is just simple price action, and that's what we got here, right? We have a minor level in here. We're just looking for areas of traffic, right, where we have a lot of touches of candles and wicks, and that's what we do, right? We go with the trend. We have our our fundamentals were telling us that metals are going to go up because of interest rates going down, inflation will go up, right? So metals will go up too, unless anything changes, right? Maybe a lot of times people talk about the Fed cutting rates by 50 basis points because they're afraid, and that usually takes place before a recession. And so maybe we'll get a large 30+% pullback on the US 30 and all of those indices. But really we're just going with what we know now, right? If something changes, we can always adjust our plan at that point. But our fundamentals are telling us gold is going to go up, right? And then what are we looking for? We're looking for technicals that align with that. So we're looking for places to go long. This is a great place to go long, right? We have an area of traffic, and yeah, that's really it. I mean, we want to. I sort of like to pair the both of them together with regard to fundamentals and technicals. But anyway, let's look at the 4 hour here. Yeah, nice retest of this level, and yeah. Hopefully we can. And I don't. This is pretty big. I don't necessarily have a take profit. I just have this zoomed out sort of to show that, right? I don't have an actual target. I'm just looking for a large breakout, and I am just going to continue to move my stops up underneath levels of support, right? So for instance, if we were already in a long position, which yeah, I should have been looking back, right? But we didn't know exactly what the announcement would be. Then for instance here we could move our stops underneath here if we were in back here, which would be in profit, and it's the same place we have them now. So really that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for trending opportunities for big trends, and I am moving my stops accordingly as we progress with the trend, right? Um, and yeah, so that's really it. Um, Gold is looking good, and really going long on gold and silver, there's not too much of a difference. I know obviously it's not the same thing, but if we're gonna have increase in inflation through the end of the year, and metals are gonna go crazy, gold and silver, it's gonna be more or less the same. So anyway, decent position there, and yeah, we're just going to wait and see how this plays out, and by the morning we'll hopefully have a better idea. We're gonna have some pretty interesting news with the Bank of Japan at the end of the week to and finish off the week, and so I think we're probably going to be have to expect a bit more volatility tomorrow, and so that's just something to keep in mind. But um, yeah, we can talk about that tomorrow. All right, guys, I wanted to give a little update on our trade here. It's Friday morning, so um, our previously we were just looking at gold and silver last night, and so I'm in a gold position and a silver position as well. So silver has moved fairly nicely here. What's good to see is that we got in at the right area, right? And so we had this level marked, and I said this last night, but we had this level marked for a while here, and so this was really the level I was looking at to go long because we came down pretty deep in here, pushed straight up very very sharply, right, very violently, and came back down initially to retest this level, which could have been an entry. I missed it. I wasn't watching at the time, and so coming back again into the level was a great place for a buy limit, and then from there we pretty much moved to the upside straight away. Now, obviously, I don't need to have this I need to have this so high. I said this last night, but I'm not looking for a specific target. I'm just, you know, I'm just trying to hold this for a while because I really think that, with all of the, um, with all of the news, the last couple days, I think that gold and silver will be very good long-term plays for long positions. Um, we will have some pretty interesting news today to end the week. So I'm going to be very careful. I'm going to be watching the chart while that news is going on. I'm not really planning on doing anything or changing anything with what I'm currently looking at, but um, hopefully we can move up a little bit more before that in case we do have some volatility. But at least with silver, with gold, gold has moved very nicely from where we entered. It's essentially the same setup. I know it's not exactly the same price action, but it's very similar. Um, Gold and silver. So we have the same sort of level here that we've had for a while, right? We can see this and understand this. Now we come down, right? We come down pretty harshly here. This was the FOMC news, right? So a lot of people were going long, and a lot of people were, um, you know, uh, going crazy with buy stops and that sort of thing, and we just get so much volatility. This is what I mean when I always like to say that I don't really like to trade news like FOMC. If I'm going to trade news, then what I will do is, like, this is a great example, is I will wait until the effects of the announcement are essentially over. So for instance here, we had the announcement, we had a big spike to the upside, corrected, pushed to the downside, and that corrected, and then a couple hours go by, we're essentially through with that, right? Like we can not necessarily ignore that, but we're sort of done with the negative impact regarding volatility with that, right? So then we come back up pretty harshly, right? Same thing that we did with silver. Um, I was looking at maybe a potential entry down here, but I did not, which would have been a lot better, obviously. But then what do we do? So we obviously break the high and we pull back. We pull back into this level, right? And so that is where we go long. We go long not immediately, which you could have. I was a little bit looking at this a little bit differently, and so I wanted to go long once we started to get a. I think if we look at the 5 minute, we can understand it better. Yeah, once we started to get a better move to the upside, where it was a little bit more clear that we were going to trade above this level, right? And so when we look at this, we come down into this level, and we just sort of uh, consolidate in the middle of the level, not necessarily. So if we would have just broken straight through and then came up to retest, I would have looked at this differently. But because we came into it from a harsh sell off, somewhat into the zone, and then we consolidated essentially within the zone and started to push back up, that is a lot more bullish in my opinion to me, um, from how I see things. And then when we look at the 15-minute chart, we can see the same thing. But what I'm saying is, like, if we, um, if this 30-minute candle would have been a lot more defined and it would have been a lot more bearish, and then we would have come up later to retest, that's not the same situation here. But a lot of people look at this and they expect these zones to be perfect. And I talk about this sometimes, but um, the zones will never be perfect, right? Like when I talk about targets being general areas and not specific price points or price lines, like you have a support line and you're waiting for that exact price to be met. Um, I talk about these zones being as general levels, and that's the way you want to look at it, right? Because if you were looking at it too precisely here, you would have probably wanted to go short because you would have seen this level being broken, and we had a bearish close below. But in reality, that's essentially just noise, as I like to call it. And so what do we have? We have our very bullish bias, extremely bullish bias, and we have price action, you know essentially adding to that bullishness, right? So we have, we already, because of rates and other news, news about potential inflation, right? We have very bullish news for gold. So fundamentally, we know we're expecting gold to move to the upside, and so we have levels of support like this. And this, if we would have come down lower, this would have been a wonderful level too to go long. Um, and so we look at those levels, and we look at the price. We look for price to move into those levels, and we look at the price action at those levels to see, what we're doing, right? So once we start to move to the upside above a little minor resistance here on a 5-minute chart, right, then we can look for a long position. And, we just have our stops a little bit bigger because we're looking for a little bit larger of a move. And so that's essentially what the game plan is going forward for the foreseeable future. That's essentially what we've been doing for a while here on gold is we've been trading. Obviously we've had some other positions, but we've just really been looking for moves to the upside. And there's really nothing wrong with wanting to only look at very trending markets, right? Obviously, we can look back at some of our other long positions, like back here, and think, oh, we should have held that, and I do think that, right? Because I'm trying to hold positions longer in trending markets, and you just can't get it right every time, right? Like here, we were targeting up here, got a little bit too tried to be a little bit too precise. Just what I was talking about. We obviously got out with some profit on the way up, which was good, and then got out with profit on the way down. We were stopped out in profit, um, but honestly, still a good trade. Nothing negative about that. But I guess what we can learn from that, and what you can learn from that, is that these things we want to be holding longer, right? And it's better to hold a trade longer and continue to move your stop loss because you have your stop loss is in profit, and if worst case scenario you get stopped out in profit, and if you have a very trending market like gold, for instance, or silver, or even Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's price action is a bit different. um, the best case scenario is that your profits just keep increasing and you don't have to do anything. All you do is continue to move your stop losses up. So that's why I've essentially over the last couple months, really, I've really transitioned more so into swing trading, or at least tried to. um, my approach now is a little bit, uh, you could call it intraday trading. That's what I like to call it. um, but yeah, over time we want to sort of transition into swing trading. um, and gold and silver right now are great opportunities to do that. If we look at silver's price action compared to gold, I really think that silver is going to provide wonderful opportunities for long positions here in the coming weeks. Um, you know, Obviously, maybe we're going to have some sort of larger correction to the downside. Depending on a lot of times when rates when they cut rates by 50 basis points. I might have mentioned this last night, but they will. That's essentially a prerequisite to something going wrong, and so because why would they not just cut them 25, right? And so a lot of times that follows a couple months or weeks later with a large correction in the market. Now, after that correction, the market resumes being bullish, but that is something to think about, right? Like for instance, this resistance here, I'm going to, although I'm bullish on gold, on silver, uh, once we reach into this level up here, I will probably take partial profit off of this position and wait for a pullback and enter again. Now, I will keep some of the initial position open, which is awesome, and then we can just slowly move our stop losses up, right, as we continue to move. But um, that's another thing is we want to hold these trades longer, right? Let's look at gold. We want to be holding these trades a lot longer, but at the same time, uh, there are opportunities to sell um, before we expect a pullback, right? Like if gold, pushes up very high, uh, a little bit higher than this, maybe, something like that, then I will close maybe not all of the position, maybe a little bit, and leave some of it open, right? Which is what I should have been doing, back here. With the part that we closed up on the way up here, that was great. But then the rest of it, I should have kept open instead of moving my stop loss into profit. Should have kept that open with stops back here, because if it would have came down, we would have still been in profit because of the profit that we sold on the way up, right? And then just hold that long term, right? So we take profits. That's part of my philosophy now. Is what I'm, and hopefully I'm. This is doesn't. Hopefully I'm explaining this decently, but right, we're looking for very trending markets, which is gold and silver right now at the moment, and we're getting in positions like this, right, at wonderful levels, right? Because fundamentally we know gold's going to go up. So what do? We look for a good place to go long. That makes sense logically, right? So this is a great support level here, and then as we work our way up and we have a very steep, like large upside move, we obviously long term know it's going to go higher, but we do know that short term we can get pullbacks. And so we can take some profit and leave some open, because the little bit that we leave open over time will greatly increase in profit, right? But I don't want this to seem like I'm just holding trades for, you know, I'm going to be holding these trades for weeks and not taking any profit. I will be taking some profit when I think that we have a likelihood of pulling back. So I just want to make that clear. But overall, the actual perspective, the way that we're viewing this now, is extremely, much bigger picture type of perspective than before. Um, I'm you can utilize the lower time frames. Like for this entry, I utilize the 5 minute chart, right? Um, but that was when I already had a very good idea of what I wanted to happen, and I had everything else from all the other higher time frames were understood in my mind, and so I just used the 5 minute chart just to see the price action at this level here. That's okay to do. What I don't like doing is when people only look at a 5 minute chart or a 3 minute chart. Some people even like to look at 1 minute charts, and that's their basis for trading, and they're looking for you know trades every single day. I'm just not a fan of that. I've done fine trading every single day, but as I continue to trade, um, I lean much more toward swing trading now, and it's because it's almost like I would rather take 2 to 3 or maybe 4 or 5 good trades a month rather than trying to trade 3 to 4 times a day. And that's just what works for me. If you like trading every day, then continue with that, right? But this I think is the best long term play, because if you look at the most successful traders who do the best, most of them are all swing traders, or at least they look at things from a much um, more zoomed out, higher time frame perspective. And so that's really my long term strategy going forward. Is that, and so um, these trades are good examples of that. Hopefully these continue to go well. I'm going to look exactly what time we have. May have some pretty crazy news with the Bank of Japan today, and so I'm going to look at that, and then but yeah, just a little update. The trades are moving very nicely. Um, Silver just hasn't moved up as much, but um, nothing to worry about regarding the price action here. Still very bullish, and so yeah, that's we have this resistance to look at, right? Not necessarily with gold. It's just that gold is at all-time highs, and so if we really zoom out on silver here, let's look at a monthly. Right, pretty interesting price action. This is a lot different than gold's price action. Now a lot of people get into different theories about maybe silver's price being suppressed and things like that. I'm not necessarily going to talk about that, but um, what we do know going forward is that this is a wonderful chart to build the case for a lot of long positions going very high. I mean, um, we could easily take out this high here, probably reach double the price we're at now, in my opinion, and probably higher. So this actually looks a little bit more of like a crypto chart, but it's kind of interesting. But anyway, there's lots of opportunity now, and so you know, like I said, we are going to have large scale pullbacks at some point on these trades. Like for instance, silver hasn't really moved up a lot, so maybe once we reach this resistance, we'll have to just sort of assess things and maybe wait for another pullback for a larger move to the upside. But with gold, uh, you know, we're moving up very nicely, and obviously we're pushing all-time highs. So there's no resistance we're looking at to the left, right? So we just have to use common sense, right? If we push up really sharply and very aggressively, we take some profit, and we expect in the coming hours or days we expect a larger pullback, and then we can look for another long position. So and there will be corrections, right? Because you know even with us trending up for a long time here on gold, we have had some short positions that have worked, and so there's nothing against that. It's just that now I think that the bullish sentiment is very high, very 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 high because of the rate news. So that's just something for us to think about. But um, anyway, we will, maybe at the market open we'll get some more volume and we'll see sort of how this progresses, and we'll go from there. All right, guys. So it is now a new week. I have this here because I had a little screenshot just to show this. I was away from my computer. So I have taken a profit here on gold. I am just looking for a bit of a pullback. It's nothing too crazy. The risk to reward that we ended up getting out with was just over a 2 to 1, which is decent, right? It's nothing wrong with that. But it's a new week. I don't just want to look here on the 1 hour chart. We can see maybe a little bit of a different story if we look at a lower time frame. But let's delete that. I want to look. Start off on a weekly chart, right? So obviously, I think this week will more than likely be bullish. I'm not trying to say otherwise, right? However, what do we have here? So big breakout, right? Then we have some only two bearish closes here, but essentially three indecisive candles, and then two very bullish weekly candle closes following. So here, what do we have previous, right? We have a long bottom wick and not a very long bottom wick there because, we had the indecision before on the week before. But this new weekly candle, I think that in order for us to continue higher, we will likely see a bottom wick being formed here on this candle. So I'm not saying maybe all the way down to this zone, but maybe just a little bit down here, right? If we want to look logically at this, let's just say give or take about halfway down through the candle, a place where we could see a bottom wick established before we move higher and break this high right here. We can look on the daily as well. Right, more than likely going to see some sort of bottom wick here on the weekly chart. But if we go down to a 30-minute chart, where is our zone? So I made this just to show about halfway through the candle. That would be down here at this support. Does that make sense? Do you see that? Right there. And so I think if we could just come down to this level, right, and maybe range a little bit. Maybe, it's Monday. We did have a pretty eventful week last week. Maybe we don't have as much volume initially at the beginning of the week this week. So I could see that being a very likely scenario here, right? So anyway, I hope that makes sense. It's just sort of a common sense thing. You know, on the weekly chart, we will probably see, like we are now, but on a little bit of a larger level, right? Coming down to, it may look like we're selling off on a lower time frame, like a 5 or a 15-minute chart, but once we look at the weekly candle, we're sort of, trying to respect the, you could call it the anatomy of a candle, right? Not that we always make a bottom wick perfectly and then it's only up from there. We can have the volatility, right? We could end up moving to the upside and then come down later, and that's also a possibility. I'm just saying that in order for this to push higher, I think we're going to have some sort of pullback. And so the idea of a pullback, like our zone, this support in here on the 30-minute chart. Let's go to 15 actually. This support here is, like we just saw, lines up very nicely with give or take halfway through the weekly candle of the previous weekly close. So anyway, and yeah, this take profit was just at the open here. So it's about the same price, but this wasn't last week. This was just at the open here when the market opened. So anyway, just a little update there. And yeah, same thing with silver as well. The thing with silver is I think we're probably going to pull back a little bit before we continue higher. Just not necessarily the wrong trade, just maybe not the best time. I think maybe in the coming hours or days we can get another great opportunity for a long position. We may retest where our entry was. But I sometimes will close trades early like this. Some people think it's stupid, that if you enter, you have to, be fully committed, and in a sense you do. But over time, if the price action changes, even just a few candles, right, that can sort of change your perspective of your overall bias, right? Not your long-term bias. Our long-term bias is obviously bullish, but just a few candles here could quickly change your short to medium term bias, right? Because if we come down a bit and then build a nice support here, we could have a much better entry. So I like to try to adapt and adapt as we need, right? So anyway, just a little update here on gold. Nothing too crazy. like I said, we got out with a good profit. But like I said, I just think we're going to get some sort of pullback. 2605 seems like a nice place. If we go a little bit lower, obviously, coming back to this zone here would be very ideal. Not necessarily, I don't necessarily think that'll happen, but if we come back here and then range a bit and build a nice support, that would be the ideal situation for me. But anyway, just a little update on gold, and yeah, so decent profit. This trade is from last week, but we're starting off the week with this as profit, so I'm happy with that. And yeah, we're just gonna go from there.